Okay, so today where I'd like to go or discuss is sort of a continuation of the prior to I am discussion that we had a few weeks ago. And essentially just asking that question, what is that? Um, from a purely inward inquiry perspective, uh, what is that? And how can we, is there a way to know it? Or is it just, is that knowing itself? Um, and so um, the reason I come to this is because there's always this question in my mind, at least, when we look at our physical development. And we've done a little bit about this in the Awakening Awareness program of looking embryologically. But going back, if we see this differentiated state that is my physical human body right now, right? And going back, and so in sort of going back developmentally, right? And kind of asking myself the same question, oh, could I do this? Could I do this with consciousness too? Right? Well, here's a thought that is a purely manifested entity, right? And then prior to that thought, there was no thought, or there was another thought, right? But where did that thought emerge from, right? Where did it just sort of spontaneously come from? Well, some people might argue that, oh, it's just, it's a neuron that was fired. Well, but how does that neuron fire? Like, why? Right? Why not another neuron and I have another thought, right? Um, and so we go back and we say, oh, there's this plane of awareness where things manifest from. Well, when we do that physically, right? Here I am, and I got 5 fingers and what, hopefully 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? And when I go back, though, there was a point where I didn't have 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? That wasn't the physical manifestation that was at that point. Okay. And so if we stopped it there, if we stopped every human development at the point of just a sphere of cells, we'd say, well, it's not going to become anything, right? So you're stopping that potential of becoming this incredible hand that can interact and grab and feel and pet or whatever it might be, right? But if I go back in time in my personal development, in the manifestation, or in all human development, in the manifestation of my physical being, I get to a point where it was just a blob of cells, right? We all did this. That's kind of the cool part about it. So it doesn't matter. And then prior to the cells, right? So sort of like, okay, well, where does the I am appear in those cells? Because prior to that, there's all what we call totipotency, that it can become anything. One cell, I can take one cell out of a certain blob of cells very early on, and that can become anything. But then there's a certain period of time in development where the cells are they've already differentiated enough to have some potency or some ability to become other cells, but not all cells. So we differentiate those, call them totipotency, meaning total potency, to pluripotency, right? The same idea would be, for instance, if I ask you, um, what is happening in my mind right now, or what's going to emerge from my mind right now, and you go, I have no idea. It could be anything. But if I say, well, I'm thinking of a color, now what happens to your filter? It goes from, oh, anything. Well, okay, what does he think? Well, I mean, I don't know. Is he having an emotion? Is he having a thought? Is he feeling something? Is it so the potentiality the of what's emerging is infinite. But if I say I'm thinking of a color, first of all, I could say I'm thinking, that takes your filter and kind of comes down a little bit, right? And then if I say, well, I'm thinking of a color, now you're going, oh, that starts to limit now what could be emerging, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So um, that's kind of the same thing that actually happens embryologically. Is there's these totipotent cells that can become anything. Then there's these pluripotent cells that can become many things, but not all. And then there's the cells that say, okay, well, you know what? Now you can become part of the nervous tissue, but we can't really go back and make a liver. Okay. And so physically, this is happening, right? And so, how far back can we come where we're a blob of cells, right? So, even in our own conscious manifestation of thoughts, emotions, sensations, whatever it might be, those are purely manifested. We go back. There's the I am. There's that first blip coming out of the totipotency, let's say, right? Um, and then we go into the totipotency, and that would be sort of maybe analogous to prior to I am. But then there's even prior to that. Okay. Which is kind of where I'd like to go to today. When the egg gets fertilized by the sperm, there's a mechanism that's put into play, right? And the big question that a lot of developmental biologists have is, it's fantastic that we have this DNA that we call the blueprint of life. That's sort of its name, is the blueprint of life, right? That all this information, all the information is actually encoded in the DNA. But the big question is the development of our human form, with our hands being as they are, with all the organs being placed in all the right areas of the human body, with our heart being formed as it is, with the brain being formed as it is, and this happening 8 billion times or more, because that's actually the people who are alive. That the question arises of, is it all just in the DNA? Is it all just in the nucleic acids that come together and that all of a sudden know how to do? Or is there a blueprint? Is there some sort of blueprint prior to this formation that creates then the physical being? Okay. And so for the inward inquiry today, kind of like asking yourself that question is, even prior to the egg and the sperm coming together to form you as this differentiation of this physical entity that created the human body, who or what were you? And in essence, like, can we use, embryology to go back from almost like, oh, my limbs are coming in, right? Because I have these limb buds that shoot out. So my limbs are coming in, my legs are coming in, my body is actually de-differentiating. It's going from this fully differentiated state to a less differentiated state. I no longer have limbs that can grab. I no longer have legs. The organs are starting to all come in. Everything is actually starting to come in. And we go back to the energy that was present prior to the egg and the sperm coming together, right? Is there some sort of primordial energy that is present throughout the universe? It must be present throughout the universe. It's not just on Earth. That helps organize the information that's actually held within the egg and the sperm, being the DNA, that then creates this manifestation and helps us have 4 limbs and a heart and a liver and a pancreas and a gallbladder and 2 lungs and intestines. Right? So is there any relationship that you have with any primordial energy source prior to you being an egg and a sperm coming together? And that's the first question, right? And the other question is, can you have a relationship with it if you feel like there is that energy source? And what is it for you? Is it a form of light? Is it a form of sound? Is it a form of fluid? Is it a form of, or is it just a waveform? Well, it can actually be all of them simultaneously. Or is it even prior to a waveform? And then, so all these are sort of questions for the inward inquiry. Okay. You may not have any answers to them. That's perfectly fine. What this process is really about is really kind of like taking yourself physically and undifferentiating yourself to this thing that you feel maybe so identified with, being your fingers and toes and brain and heart and all these things, and undifferentiating those, going back into your little amorphous blob of cells, going back to even prior to that, prior to the sperm and the egg coming together, prior to the egg actually going into the fallopian tube, prior to your great grandmother or your grandmother who was creating those eggs in your mom's womb, who already had those eggs prior to all that. What was or is there any energy form that is relatable to you, that is sort of like the blueprint of everything. Now, for me, then the question continues is, wow, and I might be leading you in some way, hopefully not. I might be biased here. But if you do have a relationship with that, um, is that relationship a way of trying to help cure diseases that may manifest? That to me is sort of the ultimate question. That's sort of like the ultimate hypothesis is, well, we have this manifestation of a disease. You brought it up, even dementia, right? Alzheimer's, cognitive impairment, some sort of manifestation of um, maybe some blockage somewhere. It happens. Is there a way of going into the blueprint and in essence sort of resonating with whatever frequency or energy form is in the blueprint, and that may be a form of healing as we are resonating back with the original blueprint energy that helped create us in the first place. So there's something that manifested, regardless. We're all stressed, right? Let's be honest. I eat chips, I eat French fries, I eat Coke. I'm stressed, right? I got 3 kids. I'm coaching 15 sports. I got work. I'm doing all this stuff, right? And at the end of the day, it's like, what am I doing, right? I should just go to the side of the river and fish and get away from all this pollution, right? There's just a new study that showed like 99% of the world is breathing air that is polluted. It's like, oh, great. Can't even get, you have to go to the top of Mount Everest, right? And even there's so much garbage from people putting it, you're probably going to be smelling all the feces from people going to the bathroom. um, so, right, so we're constantly being inundated with toxins, with whether we're breathing the air or while drinking the water, whatever it is, right? So there's a manifestation. But can we go, and the more time we sort of spend in this blueprint, if it exists, that helps recalibrate our system energetically? And we see some of this kind of coming out in terms of people really starting to look at like sound healing, light healing, right? Vibrational healing. It's sort of like, oh, maybe from the external, we can actually create a certain vibration or energy frequency that helps realign the body or the system. Light, there was just really good research that came up on, sun gazing in the morning, for instance, and how good that is for our eyes and our mental health, or using red light therapy for certain eye conditions, that we're using the red light can actually help reverse some aging issues with the eyes. Um, and so we're seeing this kind of from the perspective of, oh, you know, exposing ourselves, like infrared saunas, for instance, ultrasound, et cetera, et cetera, exposing ourselves to certain frequencies that help recalibrate. But the question is can we do that internally as well? Is there some process where, and for me, I don't know why, right? It just makes, so maybe it's just what I'm interested in or kind of how I grew up or how kind of I think about things. But for me, it really helps to sort of pictorially imagine kind of like going back into the egg and then prior to that, because we know that happened, right? So I know that as a fact. In fact, we all know that as a fact. You can't argue. You're not going to argue with me. You could, but okay. Even in 50 years, when we start developing people in artificial wombs, which we will, I guarantee it, there's still the primordial egg. And there's still the primordial energy prior to that. Right. So that would be our question for today, our inward inquiry, and go to wherever you feel comfortable. Right, go to wherever you feel safe. Go to wherever you feel that you can hold it. Right, we've talked about the zone of tolerance in awakening awareness. Like, go to wherever you feel like you're okay within your zone of tolerance, right? If you feel like pushing your zone of tolerance a little bit, then you can investigate with that, right? With a little bit of titration and resourcing, pendulating. Okay. So we will go into our practice.